Typically, I would go on the internet in the past and just be like, oh, here's a problem with blah, blah, blah. This is what I think of it.
I think a lot of kids are very straightforward with opinionated, like, this is what I feel about it, and no other opinion is right. And I feel like when they come to APS, or if they want to, they'll learn that some of your opinion could be right, but also another person's opinion could be right.
At American Public Square, we are engaging the next generation, and we're doing that by partnering with teachers and students to get them the curriculum so they can build civility skills, not just to agree to disagree, but to disagree better.
I would say that if you ever have the chance to join, I would take it. It's a fun experience. It teaches you to meet new people, how to interact, and it's really fun to really learn civil discourse versus debate, because we can get a lot more things done if people would just really have the time to listen and learn instead of arguing and not really listening.
As the student ambassadors this year, we chose gun violence because of its prevalence in our society and lives, especially in the lives of children and teenagers. We can all agree that gun violence is a negative issue with poor consequences, although we all go about solving this problem differently. We wanted to select this topic to help enlighten people to what can be done, especially considering that gun violence around our area has statistically increased.
John Stuart Mill is known to have said, "He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that." Bill Nye thank you, once said, "Everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't." On behalf of all the APS student ambassadors, I welcome you and thank you for spending the evening with us. Tonight's program is the accumulation of our work together over the course of this school year. We want to thank our parents, teachers, and school administrators who have cooperated to make our engagement possible. It is a refreshing example of school communities tackling big problems, encouraging students to foster critical thinking, and working together to produce great things. Thank you.
Hello and good evening. My name is Claire Bishop, and as Executive Director at American Public Square, it is my privilege to welcome you to tonight's program, Triggering Change, Engaging Community Education to Combat Gun Violence. This program has been produced entirely by the high school students you see here who are participating in APS's Civics Education Initiative, and it is the culmination of our student programming for this academic year. Although the topic of local gun violence hit the world stage with the mass shooting at the Super Bowl parade, students in the program actually selected this topic back in October. It was already top of mind for them, and it continues to be. This is a topic that sadly is top of mind for many in our community right now. I'm going to pause for a minute before saying this because the gravity of this statement just really hits me, as I'm sure it will hit you. Tragically, Kansas City has lost 3 children, all under the age of 12, to gun violence in the last month. This is a tragedy for our city. Although this topic is urgent and serious and tragic, we look forward to our student design program every year as it generally brings a sense of community and a shared hope for better days ahead. We feel strongly about helping our student ambassadors build their voice as they participate in this program, and it was they who decided this was a topic that needed to be addressed. We hope the students program will be a model to encourage more of us to engage in civil dialogue about gun violence and other polarizing topics so that we may work together to build a less contemptuous, safer, and more productive society. With those remarks, I'm going to turn it over to someone who, in addition to the students, educators, and our partners, deserves special recognition for the outsized role she plays in leading the Civics Education Initiative and all APS student programming. Please join me in warmly welcoming APS Program Manager Tricia Maxfield.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Thank everyone for being here. Thank our panelists and our wonderful moderator. Before we begin the conversation in earnest tonight, I want to recognize the schools and the teachers who made this program possible this year. Without their efforts, and those are many, it wouldn't be possible for us to have worked with these wonderful students and for all of us to be gathered here this evening. So please hold your loving, loud round of applause until I have finished listing their names so that you can appreciate how many communities came together. Let's start with Leah Edens from University Academy, Robert Flynn from St. Teresa's Academy, Joni Harrell from Belton High School, Mary Humphreys from Lee Summit West, Barnett Thompson from Shawnee Mission North, Brent Schulte from Olathe North, and Keith Schoen from Guadalupe Centers High School. Please show them your support. They are fabulous, and it is no easy feat. We collaborate to bring the students out of the classroom 5 different days. So they have to juggle, they have to convince administrators, colleagues, they have to talk with parents about what the students are doing. It's amazing, and they're the reason that we can do this. To our student ambassadors, you are nothing short of amazing. You picked a topic that was urgent and resonated with the community as evidenced by the turnout tonight. And you persisted when it was hard to talk about and hard to face the truth about what was going on around you. And I'm so proud of you for that. We will be better for it, for sure. But thank you. Tonight is the culminating event of a year-long project-based learning experience, but we desperately hope it is not the end for our students. It is just the beginning of a feeling and a sense of belonging and purpose in their communities where they play sports or where they go to school or where they practice faith or where they live, and that they will take the skills that they have learned this year amongst each other and spread those out across our communities. You must know that these students come to us at varied positions on the issue of guns and varied experiences with gun violence. They're not a monolith. They reflect what is reflected in our community and likely in this audience. But they didn't shy away from that. In fact, it encouraged them. They enjoyed engaging with other students who maybe had seen it from a different angle or had something to share that they'd never thought of. So with that, I hope that we will be encouraged and buoyed by their willingness to engage in civil discourse over polarizing topics, and we will take that into our communities and follow their lead. Practice that civic muscle, guys, that you built this year. Tonight, let's follow their lead and be open to hearing some of what we might agree with and some of what might be new, we haven't thought of, and perhaps something that we disagree with. But let's do it in a way that benefits us here tonight and our larger community. We are both hopeful and confident that together we will rise to their occasion. And as APS founder, Ambassador Alan Katz often says ahead of a program, if you hear something you agree with tonight, please do this. And if you hear something you disagree with tonight, please do this. Our student ambassadors are gonna fill you in a little bit more on our civility toolkit and start our show. I'm gonna turn it over to them now. Thank you.
As always, during American Public Square programming, we welcome questions and fact checks from the audience. For our audience members in person, you'll see question and fact check cards around the auditorium. When you have a question or fact check, please write it on the sheet and hold it up. A student volunteer will come by to collect it for our revolving reporter. Tonight's roving reporter is Toriano Porter with the Kansas City Star. For those of you watching virtually, please type your questions or fact checks in the chat feature. Comments in the chat will be monitored. Please note, We will likely not be able to ask the panel all the questions the live and virtual audiences will ask. Our roving reporter and team will do their best to pull out themes. We hope you have a chance to review the related resources on the event page. They can be found by scanning the QR code on your program. Kemi Coons, reporter with the KC PBS, is our fact checker for this evening and supported by student volunteers.
At American Public Square, we rely on our civility toolkit to keep our conversation on track in civil. Please take a moment to review the toolkit featured here. Several members of the audience have civility bells. These will be rung if the tone of the conversation becomes less than civil and needs to redirect. Finally, in interest of keeping the conversation flowing and, of course, civil, we ask that you not clap during the program. If the bells may also ring if the audience needs a reminder. It is now my privilege to introduce our moderator for the evening, Mary Sanchez, senior reporter at KCPBS Flatland.
Good enough. Don't need that. Okay, you can hear me well? Okay, thank you so much. And yes, thank you to the students. I know you kind of almost heard Tricia, get a little almost emotional. It's because they've done so much work. Usually when I'm here to check in on this program, this room is just filled with high school students. And then they break up in groups, and I've heard a lot of their conversations. And you want to talk about who's doing some real work, that personal work, it was the young people, which I just find amazing, and they're wonderful. And thank you for putting this together and allowing me to participate. I think probably what we need to say right off is this is a big panel. We've put together a really, really good big panel. We really want to try and just have a conversation with you guys. So the less of me is better. What I'm going to do real quickly is kind of go down the line and just say who people are, and then we're going to have you flesh that out a little bit better. Let's see, right here to my left, Jean Peters Baker, who is the Jackson County Prosecutor. Chip Brownlee, who is a reporter with The Trace, which is a national, maybe international even, publication, very well known for writing about issues around gun violence and just guns in general, frankly. Next, then we have Melissa Patterson Hazley, and she very graciously joined us a little bit late when we had one cancellation, so we really appreciate your time and for being here. And she's the 3rd district at large with your city council, Kansas City Council. Okay, next we have Kyle Hollins, and he is the founder, president, CEO, executive director, main guy behind an organization called the Lyriks, which is really the Lyriks Institution, which I am fascinated by, as we discussed a little bit earlier. Next to him, we have LaTasha Jacobs, and she is co-founder of Pretty Pistol Posse, right? And also a licensed certified gun instructor, okay? Next, then we have Marijana, Kotlaja, and she is with the University of Missouri, Kansas City. She's an assistant professor of criminal justice and also a researcher, which can be super important tonight. Then finally, last but not least, Dr. Shayla Sullivan, and she's with Children's Mercy, an expert in a medical doctor in psychology, right? Psychiatry, I just said the wrong one. I knew I said it wrong. All right. I kind of want to go just back down. Why don't we just take it from Jean, you? Everyone, no one here wants more gun violence, particularly for children. It's just been horrendous, always. But I know through the years, I've watched you really personally, I think when it's a child, you've just been very moving on that. But what I want everyone to do is, what is your role, like when the issue is gun violence, reducing gun violence, because we have very specific people here, very different roles. Like, what is your role in that issue of reduction?
So generally my role as prosecutor is, in its traditional sense, the harm has already happened. And so I'm coming after the trigger pull, after decisions were made in haste or in planning, but generally in haste. And my job is to come in when the police can solve the case, then my job is to come in and see whether or not there's a measure of justice I can achieve inside of a courtroom. I've always found that is a fantastic job, but I have found that to be a bit confining, especially when you live in a city that is the 6th most violent city in America. It's just too short for me, and so I've tried to find other things and other ways we can go about collaborating to reduce violence overall, right, to prevent more acts of violence from occurring. And so most recently, we're trying to launch again a focused deterrence effort, which worked here in this city before. It's worked in other cities across America, and I believe it can work here again.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm a reporter on this issue. Gun violence is an issue with a serious lack of information and data. You would think that that would not be the case, considering it's one of the leading causes of death in the US, for children in particular. But I kind of come from it from that angle to improve the public information that's out there about the issue and to help improve the data where we can. We're not researchers, but we can do some of the data work and get some of that data out there. And then for me in particular, I write a newsletter called The Trajectory, which focuses on gun violence solutions. And one of the reasons that we started doing that was because at The Trace, the only issue that we cover is gun violence, and that can get, unfortunately, kind of depressing. It can be discouraging to cover this issue. And we wanted to try to find a way to highlight some of the good things that are happening and some of the progress that's being made. And so that's why we started this newsletter, which highlights the people and the programs and the places all over the country that are doing good work to reduce gun violence in the US.
Thank you. And actually, I can say as a reporter, it's very helpful. Reporters read other reporters' work, editors read it, get ideas. It's really helpful.
Prosecutors read it too.
I'm gonna be toggling between 3 different hats tonight, actually. The first one is a mom. So I went to Courtney's funeral. She was 11 years old. She was one of the little girls that did pass away due to being struck in her home. And she was born just 3 weeks before my daughter. And so to see all these little kids at the funeral, you know, her classmates, it was unnerving. I can remember with just old age deaths in my own family that I didn't let my daughter go to, because I'm like, you know, she's a little kid, and so I'm just like, let her have the memories. And I guess I just was kind of a lazy parent that didn't want to talk about death and all of that with her. She was in the room when our grandmother passed away, and she was 3. She's like, why is everybody in here crying? Like, what's wrong with y'all? So I didn't want to kind of disrupt her processing of death, and I wasn't really ready to talk about it. But seeing all these kids in there was incredible. So a mom, I'm also a researcher, a Ph.D. in educational psychology, and I teach teachers. And so thinking of school children again is kind of another lens that I use in terms of what's happening just as a society and with young people. And then third, newly a council person. And that's probably the biggest influence I can have right now, but in a way that many may not suspect. You know, I'm not a police officer, so I don't go to shoot reviews and I don't go to the scene of crimes. I really hate getting the messages that somebody else died that we get on our group emails. You even get them, right, DJ? Works in my office. And it's tragic to know that that's happening every day. But I'm focused on a few things that I'll talk about later tonight that I think more addresses root causes of the gun violence happening that I think I can have some control over as a council person. So I'll talk more as we go on.
So Lyrik Institution, we target and focus on young adults that are 13 to 25. we target 3 areas. That's poverty, criminality, and violence, because there's 3 different ideations, 3 different thought processes that push people into those areas. And because there's 3 different ideations, each one has to be handled differently. So like I think we were on the conference yesterday. I think what I give to this space is cultural competency. Coming from the culture, I did 90 months in a federal penitentiary. I was sentenced to 10 years in the state. Ended up doing 4 months on that before getting sent to the feds, and being introduced to cognitive behavior modification. I'm not only a student of behavior modification as far as learning the modalities. I'm a product of it. It changed my thought process, and what I identified was that the curriculum the modality wasn't culturally competent. And a lot of times what we do is we'll take a curriculum from Oklahoma and then we'll put it in front of a black teacher or a Hispanic teacher or an Asian teacher, and we'll call it culturally competent. It's not, it's just the teacher is. But creating modalities and programs that are actually culturally competent is something that we do. So our target is to actually like hyper focus on the demographic that is like causing the problems. I'm one of the frontline organizations that we have in Kansas City. I'm one of the only ones that target 13 to 25 that has a pipeline to get those type of individuals or those young adults into our program. A lot of programs, they trickle in those kids. They might have a shooter, they might have criminality. Like, if they're in my program, they actually, in some form or some fashion, have already committed or have demonstrated some type of criminal or violent ideation. So being able to intervene or have an intervention before it gets to Gene is the work that we do. And then personally, the work that I do is not too many people are able to be or as articulate to talk about the issues and the struggles that go on in our communities. A lot of times we go to the inner city to get solutions from people that are already in high level trauma, that have already been in a violent situation. So their thought process isn't even really ready to have that conversation. And then on the other side, sometimes people just don't know what they don't know, and they can't articulate or don't even know that they're trapped in this systemic cycle. So being able to be a thought agent when we're talking to civic leaders or people that are in the justice system, having a voice to advocate from the struggle is very, very important.
Thank you. The space that I'm coming from this evening is that of education. Not only education within the community for the Black community specifically, simply because we are the most impacted by gun violence and the trauma within, but we're the least educated when it comes to firearms, when it comes to the safety of it, when it comes to anything with that tool, but also to work with folks within the justice system, Councilwoman, to educate there, because you are in a position to change lives, change legislations, make laws, just impact people on a larger scale, but not, again, as educated within the industry or within firearms as you should. We hear so much misinformation being shared from the top of the house all the way down, but nobody's willing to sit down and get educated to truly understand what it is that we are all having to deal with. So I come from the space of education. I come from the space of being a mother, getting into this. Some people ask me if I have a military background. No, I purchased my first firearm 6 years ago. I did it because I would, again, get in that space. I knew I wanted it to protect myself as a single woman as well as my children as a single mother. And I found myself with a firearm in my home that I didn't know how to manage. I didn't know that it didn't have a safety on it. I didn't know these certain measures were put in place, and I have it in my home with my daughters. And I'm putting them in more of harm's way than I am thinking I'm protecting them with this firearm. So then, as I was sharing earlier, I would go to the gun range. How many people that look like me were in the gun range? How comfortable am I to ask the old white gentleman next to me to support me in learning and, and so I took it upon myself to go and get educated, go and get certified so that I could bring that education and those resources back to my community so that we could have a better understanding. Black women were at the top of
new gun owners between 2020 and 2021. And we're probably still at the highest rank, but again, how many of us feel comfortable going to those gun ranges, being in those spaces to get educated, to get comfortable, but we still have access to these tools. So again, educating on within the community awareness, but also working with those who can make a true impact, a larger impact for the communities that are experiencing the violence. Education in that space as well.
Good evening, everyone. So as Mary mentioned, I'm a Ph.D. in Criminology and Criminal Justice. And really, I'm coming to the space to discuss evidence-informed practices when it comes to reducing gun violence. So there's a significant difference between what we do and what we achieve. And so we need to be able to distinguish those two. And oftentimes in the criminal justice system, we focused on what we do. Do we reduce arrests? Do we have more prosecutions? Do we end up picking up more drugs? And we don't focus enough on what we actually achieve. I'm also the lead evaluator for the city on the Violence Prevention Fund, and this is the first time the city has funded something so large to assess a variety of programs. So we have programs that focus on reentry, mental health, behavioral health, summer youth programs, and we also have 30 neighborhood organizations that are currently working, creating strategies to address gun violence in their communities. And so I have a team of about 10 researchers, and we come together. We pull the best evidence-based practices that are applicable across the United States, but also internationally. What are people doing, and how do we measure the programs that we have in the city, and then also provide recommendations for the programs as we look at them, and they're funded over the next 5 years. Because crime is solvable. There are solutions out there that exist, so we have to figure out what works, and it's not just one approach, it's multifaceted, and what works in our city. And so that is my role and my place.
Thank you.
And I have to just say, as I hear you all talk, it's just exciting, like so many different perspectives. I'm excited to learn from you all. So when I was a baby psychiatrist at Children's Mercy, I got voluntold that I was gonna help lead our suicide prevention efforts. And if you've ever been voluntold, sometimes you kind of walk into something and you're not sure what you're getting into. And I realized we have this tremendous potential to make change. And I was spending lots of time in the ICU and on the floors of the hospital, meeting parents for the first time ever on the worst day of their lives, when their child had either been a victim of a gunshot wound or had a suicide attempt. And in those conversations, what I really came to realize was how much of this was preventable. And I felt like I was spending a huge amount of time after the fact. And I really wanted to think about why we weren't doing more prevention. That's something that the field of pediatrics is really well known for. We have immunizations and well child checks and so many things. But especially in my field of psychiatry, there's not as much prevention. Usually people don't come to us until things are really awful. So that's where I really started focusing my research on prevention and really trying to empower caregivers and using what we know about child development and what we know about how young people tend to be very impulsive, and often we really need to rely on caregivers to make the environment safer. So that's what I've been focusing on.
Great, thank you. I think I kind of want you guys almost just like talk amongst yourselves. Just hearing each other's perspectives. I mean, first of all, do we have it right? Is Kansas City as violent as our headlines keep saying? We were talking about the statistics. I mean, are we all in agreement there that we are really one of the, what we say the six is usually what we say. We say in the top 10, now we say the sixth most violent. Somebody? Is that right? Do we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay, so what is it about Kansas City from kind of your differing perspectives? You know, what is it from your fields that is different than other cities that we need to get a handle on that we haven't before?
From my perspective, I think we have chronic disinvestment in certain areas of the city, and those areas is where you find most of the pain points. Those areas is where you find higher levels of stress, greater inability to cope with the environment because of how stressful it is. But I do want to say something about the news in Kansas City. The news in Kansas City is hyper fixated on reporting gun violence. As an elected official, I can tell you we'll have a story about something good, something positive. It will get bumped for a shooting. And on the one hand, that is informing the community of what's happening. On the other hand, it is creating sort of a callous on people to where it almost becomes such a natural part of life that people are numb to it. And it might not be numb to the people in this room because clearly you're here and you're interested. But the people who, whose cousin that is, or whose classmate that is, or who lives down the street, this hyperfixation of talking about it. And then also the way that we report it. You never hear about, well, what is those people's lives like? I know that they had a life before they decided to shoot somebody yesterday. I know they had a life before they got shot. I know that they have a story. I know that there is something that led to that moment. We never get to know about that. It's automatically, and I know we have a tendency to do that, but especially in the news, we have a tendency to write people off and tell that story in that snapshot, and we never get to talk about what led to that. And I think that contributes to our inability to solve it because we don't know a lot about those people. Now me, unfortunately, fortunately, I went to school with people that got shot and killed. So I knew them from elementary school all the way up until that point in junior and sophomore year. So I knew the trajectory of that person's life, and I had the whole story. And I know that that person was not just a scoundrel for the whole time. Like, I know that because I was there. But you that are watching it, you don't get to know that. And we're painting these very broad brushes on people just by the way that it is reported. And I would like to implore the news system, not you, I think you're doing a great job. I would just like to implore the news, I would like to implore particularly our local news, to have some humanity in the way that they're reporting both perpetrators and victims. I think that is an important piece of the puzzle. And I would like to hear those stories. I know those stories, and you would like to hear them too. And there's nothing bad about looking at a person that does something wrong and respecting their humanity.
No, thank you. You know how a young woman that I spent some time with this weekend who lost her brother 6 months ago to gun violence, she said, you tell the stories of how he died, but not how he lived. She's right.
I think people's rate of care isn't enough. I think it's so new to some people that it's like a wow factor or a shock. You know what I mean? Like, this has been going on the east side of Truce forever. Like, this isn't a new concept. Like, I've never seen this many people, care about what goes on the east side of Truce. You know what I mean? Until it crossed over, and then, it affected like 1.2 million people at a parade, right? Like, that wasn't new. And you keep hearing, this is Killer City, this is Killer City. Yeah, like, because people have desensitized to it. It's so routine for us, and we have these sporadic moments of intense emotion over it, but the intense emotion is an emotion and it fades, and then people that are here in these environments, they still have to live out those environments. They still have to raise kids in those environments and stuff like that. So what I used to say was, they don't care, they don't give a shit. That used to be my motto, right? Like, they just don't care. But what I've learned is people do care. They think that the care that they give is enough. It's not enough, you know what I mean? Like, you're here, thanks for your tears, we need to change the system. Thanks for your cards and your $1.2 million. I really appreciate $1.5, $1.6 million, really do. But the organizations that are on the ground have staffing of $300,000, you know what I mean? And there's 5 organizations that need that support. And then we're gonna have all of these restrictions and like ambiguous reporting things, you know what I mean, that the people that are actually on the floor that have the ability to make that change, it's system changes, right? Like, who wants to get up and challenge the feds? Who wants to get up and challenge the city? Who wants to get up and, like, I've heard today somebody say it's never going to change. And, like, people have desensitized to actually pushing a system change, right? Like, if you really care, this is my example. Like, if you love your kid and your kid gets sick, you're not going to work. You're going to stop what you're doing to make something else happen, right? Like, that's the level of intentionality that needs to go into violence reduction, right? And it's not going to be sweet. This is violence reduction. It's going to be nasty. It's going to look ratchet. It's going to look like everything that you don't look like. You know what I mean? That's the God honest truth. And once we get to this place where we realize, like, we can't save, we can't go in and just go wrap our arms around little Johnny, because little Johnny don't trust you. You know what I mean? Little Johnny wants to hear somebody to tell him, you know, like, yo, I fully understand where you're coming from, but that just wasn't the best decision. Here's 50 more that you can choose. But when we keep going in, trying to use the same systems to create this broad change, it's like, you wouldn't do it anywhere else. Why are you doing it in violence reduction? You wouldn't do it at Sprint. You wouldn't do it at Target. You wouldn't do it nowhere else. But when it comes to this space, we're just like, it's going to get better, and we can keep doing the same thing. It's impossible.
I think at this point, Toriana, do you have something from the audience or the students? Thank you, though.
Roving reporter, Toriano Porter, Kansas City Star's editorial board. I am joined by a student-led group from Belton High School, Alyssa, Jolene, and Eliza. They're going to help me as I answer these questions, but this is a student-led event, and one of the questions has to do with schools, and maybe one of you guys up here on this wonderful panel can answer this question for our audience. An audience member wants to know, why are there so many school shootings as compared to the United States?
Oh, you know that one. You know that.
More school
Why are
shootings
there
in
more,
the U.S. compared
yes,
to other
compared
countries?
to other countries, yes.
Well, I would just say that that's honestly one of the first reasons I got into this, was because in high school, in my yearbook class where I first kind of was learning about, like, what journalism was, I remember Sandy Hook, and that happened my 10th grade year. And so I've grown up in this time of school shootings, and so I 100% get that feeling of, this is happening all the time, they're scary, we shouldn't be losing kids like this. But the reality is they are quite rare. The US does have a lot more school shootings than other countries, but they are still quite rare, and young people are safer at school than they are at home, which is something that we don't talk about. And I think the school shootings conversation, the mass shootings conversation, all comes back to the way that y'all are talking about, the way that the media covers this subject. It covers it very poorly, and I agree with that. And part of that is the way it covers the school shootings and the mass shootings, because those are quite rare. The more common gun violence is suicides, people dying in communities every day across the country, and the media does a very poor job of covering those.
Prosecutor, this question is for you. You mentioned in your introduction focused deterrence. Can you explain to the audience exactly what that means, what it entails, and how you go about it?
I'll give that a try. So it is, focused deterrence is an evidence-based, academically tested theory of how you can reduce whatever type of issue that you have. In Kansas City, we do it, we're attempting to launch it again to address violence, specifically gun violence, and we want to put an emphasis on youth, our youth that are engaged in gun violence, because that's what we've identified as our leading problem. That said, what is it? It is an identity kind of, an identification system where we try to find people that are at most risk of being victims of violence or being perpetrators of violence. And I don't want you to necessarily think about those are two separate groups. They're often the same. They're the same. They may flip labels on different days because that's their reality. And so if our goal is to try and reach this group of individuals that is at most risk of being a perpetrator or a victim of violence, how can we do that? There's a couple of levers they say that you can pull. One lever might be that law enforcement lever where they have committed a crime and we are trying to prosecute them in an effort to deter them and the rest of their associates out of doing that kind of behavior. I love what I do. I believe in what I do. I believe that justice does come out of the building that I work in, but I know that that's not the primary answer. So the other lever is the one that we look to pull far more often, and that other lever is a services lever. What can we do for this particular individual that may assist them into making different decisions? So it's kind of that basic. It is, which pathway can we go with this individual that's really at high risk? We have to pick the right people to help us at the community level because police and prosecutors do not have the credibility to really work in this space as far as services go. And so we find members of the community that have a cultural competence to do this kind of work, but also the right education to do this kind of work.
All right, one more for the councilwoman there. You mentioned that the media doesn't quite tell those stories, and just civilly and respectfully, I'll push back a little bit on that. I know the paper that I work for, the Kansas City Star. We have tried to humanize these young people and these people that die violently, and also the perpetrators and where they go wrong and all of that. So I'll push back on a little bit on that. But I wanted to ask you, as your time on the city council, what has the city council been able to do to address gun violence and the homicide rate that we do have in the city?
So I'm 8 months into my term, and so a lot of what has taken place as it relates to gun violence has already started. So the professor mentioned here that she is evaluating our violence prevention fund. Regretfully, the mayor pro tem, who you really wanted, Rita Park-Shaw, couldn't be here because she had a death in her family, and so she asked me to fill in for her. But one thing that we haven't done as a city is evaluate our grant making and our investments in terms of what we are doing. Preventing violence is some of the things like cleaning up your neighborhood, creating a trash pickup program, creating a 3-on-3 basketball tournament every Thursday, paving streets, cleaning up vacant lots. I have a big vacant lot to single family housing project. The RFP for 47 vacant lots in Washington Weekly will come out on Monday. And everybody in the city is really excited about that. These types of things that the city can do are more infrastructure and investment based, and they're more upstream, as Dr. Jones would call it, who is the director of our health department. But change that we're measuring from this violence prevention fund, while groundbreaking, is slow. And I know we all want fast change, but we are measuring things that could take at minimum 5 years, to have an impact. In research, we would call that a longitudinal study. And it's not sexy, right? Because you're not gonna find out, for 15 years if what you did worked, but the consistency is what's important. And so I think the city council is pulling a number of levers as it relates to improving the environment that people live in. So if I do my job as a city council person, I need to reduce the stress in the 3rd district. I need to make people's lives easier. I need to make City Hall as boring as possible so that people aren't there testifying and yelling at us. Like, I need it to be a well-oiled machine. People have trust in what we're doing. We're getting things done. That's kind of the role of the city council. And I hope that answers your question, but it's not a one size fits all. There's literally 15, 20 different things happening at the council level, all aimed at trying to make this place better. Better.
Thank you. Thank you, Toriano. I appreciate those good questions. I kind of almost want to pick up where Kyle was and just to me, what I was kind of hearing was that's the conversation shifting to more about systemic issues. And like, is Kansas City on the cusp of maybe possibly even beginning to get it right? You know, how different does this moment in time feel? Yes or no? And then kind of almost like, what else? You know, anyone, just from any different discipline that you all are coming from.
Go ahead, I
So
want to hear about your data.
we're definitely asking the right questions. One of the things that I want to highlight first, I kind of want to follow up and then I'll bring it back full circle. But I think we have to realize that gun violence is very opportunistic and it's very impulsive as well, and it's retaliatory. And so one of the reasons that we in Kansas City might be seeing such high crime rates, it's not just something that happened yesterday, right? It might be something that happened a month ago or a year ago, because Kyle, you know this, the streets don't forget, right? And so that ends up also coming back. In Kansas City, we have had a lot of programs, and it's different to have a program and it have, kind of going back to what we were saying about what you do and what you achieve. We have not been well at measuring what we achieve in our city, but we are starting to look at those steps. We have KC 360 that has convened a lot of people in the same room that have never been in the same room before. So whether that be academics, whether that be city council members, criminal justice entities, the business community too, because every single person has a seat at the table to address this issue of violence. So we are on the right steps, but we also need better data and we need better communication across different sectors. And we don't have that right now, and a lot of large cities do. So when we're talking about a youth that Kyle serves, there should be some sort of platform where the youth that Kyle serves, you could see if that youth has been picked up by KCPD, what other services that youth has had, right? If they have had citations in the court, because that is going to also alter how Kyle deals with that youth, a better, more collected system so we don't have to repeat services. Dosage is important, but the specific type of dosage is really what matters. So if we end up doing 10 different interventions with one kid, first of all, that kid might be overwhelmed with all of that and like, I give up, I'm not gonna participate in this. And so we need more informed ways that we are dealing with these issues and individuals that perpetrate issues. Because most gun violence, so in our city specifically, 75% of our gun violence and our crime focus is centered in 10% of the city. That is it, 31 square miles. It looks kind of like a vortex. And what's down the middle? The Paseo corridor. And so if we can really target person-based and place-based strategies, and we can collectively be better informed of how and what we are doing, that's gonna make the world of a difference. And we have models all across the country. Chicago, Boston are doing excellent work when it comes to this. So that's just one part of it.
My issue was over-explaining. Like, I think we're moving in a right direction, but like, we've been talking about using the community to do this. Like the culture understands what it needs, and we're over-explaining like a black woman or a woman having to explain their credentials. I say that all the time, but like, we're over-explaining why these things work, and because there's no measurable, there's no data sets for what we naturally do as a culture, now we have to over-explain to get it to meet these metrics that weren't even designed from the culture. They were designed from Europe, or, you know what I mean, these other areas, and then collectively put together. I'm not saying that we haven't studied America. I'm not saying that at all, but what I know about the work that I do, The school Southeast sits in a neighborhood, and Central sits in a neighborhood, and regardless how DESE brings down how best practices should be, the culture is ran by the neighborhood in which it sits in, right? So because of that, that means that the rules and the procedures have to be different there, just as well as it has to be different in the 30s and different in the Northeast corridor, because now that school speaks, 36 different languages, right? So that's 37 different cultural issues and struggles that they got. So how we collect data, it has to shift. I think now, where my hope is, where my faith is going towards is, I think there are people that get it, that get that we need to change the way that we do philanthropy. We get that we need to change the way that we send these RFPs out. But there's still gatekeepers that still want things to be the exact same way as they want it to be, and they call it best practices, right? But for who? Like, who gets to determine whether this best practice is when you have somebody that's been mitigating? So you're living in a war-torn country, right? And these people have learned how to live with each other and survive with each other, even in the midst of violence. How can you say they don't know how to solve their own problem? That's insane. So then when I produce this idea, this philosophy, they're like, oh, no, that's not best practices, so we can't use that. Oh, no, we're not going to fund that. That's not best practices. Oh, we're not going to, you know what I mean? Them are the systems that have to change, and that's why I love working with you, is because, like, you give me an opportunity to put the data that I think is important in the front, right? Because a lot of the work that I do on the ground, like, I have to be an advocate. I have to champion and listen to all these people tell me I don't know what I'm doing, and then go raise money on my own to prove that is happening, to get people to say, oh, well, we should take a look at that. You know what I mean? And what it makes me feel like is you're okay with letting it burn. That's why I'll be like, oh, y'all don't care. You know what I mean? Like, oh, so we got 5 years to determine that you're actually good at what you do. But there's going to be kids that die along that journey. You know what I mean? It's okay. Let them die. But once we certify you and say that you're really, really good, then we're going to give you the money to actually do the work that you're going to do. So let them die, and then you can go ahead and get your work on.
One thing I want to say that we don't do well as a city. Did I cut you off? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One thing I want to say that we don't do well as a city is we don't really have places, physical places for young people to do things. So we have, community centers that nobody wants to go to. Okay, let's just be honest. We have, you can have all the hot summer nights you want to, and I think that certain kids are just not going there. And so we don't have these, I guess you call them third spaces. Like, we don't have these extra spaces where kids are allowed to go and loiter, where kids are allowed to go and just be and just goof off and not have an agenda and just somewhere to just hang, And so what they're doing is they're hanging like in the street, where places where they're not supposed to be, coming across things that they're not supposed to come across because they literally don't have spaces, like literally. And I can say that for a fact as a parent. So if I want to take my daughter to an arcade, to a bowling alley, to a skating rink, to Sky Zone, I have to leave the city. It's like a donut. I have to leave Kansas City proper to do any of those things. Those things are not available in the city proper of Kansas City, Missouri at all. Check it. Where's the fact checkers? It's true. These things are not available. I mean, and it's kind of insane. And so we get frustrated with kids when they are places where we don't want them to be. When they're cramping our style and when they're in our space and when they're not following our adult rules, because they don't have anywhere else to go. And so, we were going to the mall to loiter, and, we were going to, like, skating rink was even in Grandview. It wasn't in Kansas City. So you had to have a car. I remember my mother's speedometer didn't work in her car. And my friends were in the back seat like, how fast are we going, Melissa? I'm like, making fun of me because my mama's car was raggedy. But she got us to the skating rink, and that was somewhere for us to be. And I think that those places, so that's what I wanted to pivot to what I'm actually focusing on. That's one of the things that I'm definitely focused on, creating actual spaces for youth to be, that they are welcome, that they are belonging, where they have positive adults, where they don't know that they're getting an intervention necessarily, but they're there and it's fun.
Thank you. Yeah. Did someone else want to?
Yeah, so I want to kind of piggyback on 2 points that both of you made. So Kyle, I'm going to push back a little bit. So you said we're over-explaining. I think we're under-explaining, because I think we have a lot of programs that have been in the city that have done a lot of programming. And what I explain to my students when I'm teaching statistics is, especially with evaluation, like, how do you evaluate a program? And so we start and we talk about, hey, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? People have heard me say that. We have a lot of programs that we thought common sense sounded good. An example would be DARE, right? Scared Straight.
Yeah.
Awful. Those programs just do not work, but the intentions in those were good. No one was trying to cause harm. And so we have a lot of programs in our city that might be there as well, that are trying to do good, but we have to assess if they are. As stewards of the public dollar, we should have every program evaluated. If a foundation is funding something, if City Council is funding something, we should be able to say what that program is achieving. Because if we don't, I don't think that's ethical. We're not being good stewards of that funding. And so I think that is step one in Kansas City, being able to really assess what we have, what's working, because especially, here's an analogy for students, right? So students, you study a lot, right? That's something that what you do. What you achieve is the grade, right? So if you're not studying correctly, you can study as much as, you can study 15 hours, but if you're not studying the best way, or if you're studying random stuff, it won't matter what grade you get on the test, right? And so the same thing with the criminal justice system. There are strategies that we know can have better outcomes. And so we need to focus on those and see what has been done in different areas and try different things in our city, but measure it and hold people accountable. We haven't held people accountable, and everybody has a place in that, so.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we have to measure things, but I hear your frustration, right? Because it can get in the way sometimes, and it feels like it delays everything forever. One thing that just keeps going through my head is that we have a lot of guns. That's a very simple fact, but I just want to acknowledge we have a lot of guns and we have a lot of access to guns.
Wow, big point.
Okay. So I think that's a big difference in our region, and that's not everywhere, not even everywhere in our country. So in the Midwest, and specifically locally, there's a lot of access to guns, and especially for children. Even in homes where guns are locked up, we have data that tells us a quarter of kids in homes where the guns are locked up tell you they can get access to a loaded gun in 5 minutes. And so access is a big thing, and even like with the school shooting question, while it's not common, I totally agree with that, it does not happen in every country in the world like it does here, because children here have a lot more access to guns, and I think that's a big core piece of the issue.
And what's different here, meaning Missouri, is children are not prohibited from possessing weapons. I'm gonna say that again. Children under Missouri law are not prohibited from possessing firearms. And that's a pretty new change that happened, I think, in the year 2017. It was, once we had a little more sense, we took that particular law off the books, along with taking some other gun regulations for adults off the books as well, and we became an open carry state at that point. So we're in a great gun experiment time. Really from the 2017 till about 2021, we made a lot of major changes regarding our regulation, our deregulation of firearms. And what we can show you, on that timeline is pre the gun experiment. While we had high violence rates, they're not anything like our violence rates today. So today's violence rates, it's one factor. When you do a big gun experiment, one factor would be that putting more guns in more people's hands in an area where there's poverty and there's a lot of other issues. There's been disinvestment. There's, Kyle has to fight for funds, rather than well, I don't think anyone fought for the $1.4 million that was spent on the Chiefs parade. That was the direct cost, $1.4 million for that parade. But with the mass shooting, it ended up costing us closer to $30 million. So this is, what we do is not free, but we allow, others are making laws for us that have a financial impact on us, as well as a whole lot of trauma.
And so how do you measure me stopping a kid from killing somebody? Or how do you measure a kid building a relationship with somebody that changes the trajectory of their lives? I don't have an issue with evaluating a program. I have an issue with evaluating a program and saying that these are the variables that determine criminality is going down or violence is going down. When I have a kid, okay, so I'll give you a prime example. So the kids that ended up shooting the North Kansas City up, they had been in my program for 9 months, right? They shoot that school up, right? So one of them, they're all related. One of them is a shooter from Hy-Vee Arena, right? Actually skinned the bullet, right?
That means a non-fatal.
You're right.
The bullet hit but didn't kill.
The one that had been in the program that had the skinned the bullet is not incarcerated, right? Not doing time, big growth, but then the other three that were involved in it, they're currently, going through the court proceedings, right? Their issues weren't about violence, their issues was about criminality. So we solved the criminality problem, but we got a data tick because of the violence. And then we'll group all of that together to call it violence or criminality altogether. I don't have an issue with things being evaluated. When I go in there and say, this kid isn't what you think he is because you need to villainize him because you just somehow violence crept into your backyard, like that doesn't take away from all the growth that this kid has had along the way, but that's what's happening though. You know what I mean? I understand it shouldn't, but it is. And then when I go into a philanthropic space or I go into the city, this is a prime example, go into the city, I'll say, hey, we need to do a hot summer nights, right? Well, I did and asked for the money and it got taken away, put that out there. But no, that wasn't you.
It was not me.
It was not you, it wasn't you. But
I would have let you try hot summer nights. Hey, if you think you can make it happen.
So my thing is, we know as a culture, right? Like kids want to have fun, they want a place to hang out, they want to do all those things, right? But then you bring in this programmatic piece and say, what we know is when you bring this many young adults together, there's going to be conflict. Mm-hmm. And there's a big difference between controlled chaos and chaos, right? So when there's controlled chaos, we saying, we know they're going to fight, but how about we bring in organizations that do conflict resolution and stop letting kids get into a fight and walk right out to the right outside and get into a shootout, right? So we know how to put these measurable things in, but when we present it, what we hear is, why are we paying for kids that are killing each other to have fun? How is that going to solve? Well, we can go right on over to Omaha where they've been doing it, and it reduces the violence amongst the youth there, though, right? So that's what I mean by saying like we're over-explaining best practices that are already going on. I just came back from Louisiana in Houston, and literally they're running a deflection center in a youth internship program that is reducing their juvenile imprisonment rate astronomically. But then when I'm sitting in front of my people, I gotta over explain and say, yo, this is this. They're like, well, we don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
no,
that's
I
what
appreciate
I mean by
it. Actually, I think you and I are going to have many more conversations because it's that shifting. Chip and I were talking earlier about narratives take on, and media helps perpetuate sometimes narratives that they might be true, but they're not the full truth, or it just twists where people are thinking. And one of the things that I just wanted to allow LaTasha to address before we go ahead and switch to another question from the audience or the students, and that's the work that you're doing in Jeff City, because we do hear that a lot. Okay, we do have more guns here. You can track, it was the correlation between when we lessened, permits, training. But you're actually down in Jeff City having conversations with some of the people that passed that legislation. Can you talk a little bit about just speaking across, racial, cultural lines, and, how do you address them?
Definitely. I think one of the biggest takeaways I've received in going, I have one visit to Jeff City, so it was very beneficial, was we as gun owners or as pro-2A individuals, when we look at the legislation or when we look at laws, we look at just a single issue. So we go into those offices and we're ready to argue that one single issue. One of the ways I was able to get in, become a member of Western Missouri Shooters Alliance was from a conversation that was put together by KCUR to bring folks who were all 2A together to say, hey, how can we work on the gun violence? And I sat in a room full of old white men. I was the only black woman, and there was one older black man there. And the debate just kept going back and forth about what needs to be done when it comes to gun violence, this, that, and the third. And finally, I spoke up and said, how many of you have been in Kansas City? How many of you live in Kansas City where we're having this conversation? So again, going back to Jeff City, we have these people who are having these conversations, who are changing these laws. One, don't understand guns to the fullest. And two, even if you live within Kansas City, you live on the west side, you live on the outskirts of Kansas City. So you truly don't understand. I don't even understand gun violence to the magnitude that Kyle made, that it sounds like you have. I've had friends that I went to school with, but I don't even understand. So I don't even see myself worthy enough to sit in a space to have these certain type of conversations, but I'm more connected than those who are changing laws that will impact these communities.
No, thank you. I mean, even just the humbleness of saying, I don't understand it as well as you. I mean, I could say that to every one of you here and probably everyone in the audience on, various issues. We didn't go to Cammie at all. Was there a fact check that we needed to do?
Right here. Right here. Here we go.
Hi, so our first fact check, we had a question from the audience asking what training went into carrying a obtaining a concealed carry license in the state of Missouri. And according to the Gifford Law Center, as of 2016, when revisions were made to the Missouri State Legislature, there are no specific number of hours needed to obtain a concealed carry license, although an individual would need to pass a 1 hour long NRA course.
That 1 hour long? So as a conceal and carry instructor for the state of Missouri, and I was certified in the state of Kansas, you are required to attend an 8-hour course in order to get certified and take that form to the sheriff's office in order to apply to get your conceal and carry. So it is a mandatory 8-hour. It does include the range portion or, the live fire portion, but it is an 8-hour course that you must take in order, or must sit in order to obtain your to apply to get your conceal and carry permit.
To be an instructor or to?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, instructor.
Well,
individuals.
I think they meant individuals.
Someone who wanted to carry individually.
You're saying that's current?
Yes.
No.
But, I would just say that the licenses are still offered, right?
Right.
But you're no longer required to have a license to carry in public. And that's happened all over the country right now.
Right.
We have 29 states in the U.S. states that don't require anybody to get a license or a permit to carry a gun in public. And many of those states, before they passed those laws, had the training requirements that y'all are talking about. But when they passed that law and removed that requirement to have a permit, that essentially got rid of the training requirement, even though it might still be required to get a permit, but you don't need the permit anymore.
And that's the misconception, and that's where I've, again, stepped into the role of instructor. So many of us in Missouri say, oh, well, you don't need a permit in order to open carry or concealed carry in the state of Missouri, which is completely true. Mm-hmm. But in order to get a permit, you are required for that 8 hours because it does give you a few more luxuries or privileges when it comes to carrying. But there is a distinct difference, and also the wealth of knowledge that you gain from that required 8-hour course. To sit in and learn, I didn't know before when I was a concealed carrier without a permit and just walking around within the state of Missouri as I can legally, that even if I park my vehicle in the post office parking lot, I am committing a crime. Not that I walked into the post office with my firearm, but the parking lot alone. And those are things that we just as everyday civilians wouldn't understand or wouldn't know without taking that course. So again, I advocate for any and everyone who wants to carry a firearm, even if you don't go and get the permit, to take that course, to get educated, to ask those questions at the gun range.
Yeah, so we also had another fact check from an audience member asking about why the degree of violent crimes has gone up so much since they graduated high school in 1966. So a Gallup poll found that since the 90s, people have believed that violent crime has become more common. But in fact, since the 90s, violent crime has actually become less common. But between the period of the 60s and the 90s, violent crime went up about 49%, or sorry, fell 49% between the 90s and the current day.
Thank you. That's part of those narratives.
It on the news too.
Yeah.
All right. As this is a student-led event, I would like to introduce a student to ask more questions from the audience.
Dr. Sullivan, we have 2 questions for you, and I'll give them with space in between. How does the prevalence of gun violence impact the health care Children's Mercy Hospital provides?
It's a huge piece of what we do because we are a level 1 trauma center, so we have so many children coming in with firearm-related injuries. As a psychiatrist, I see kids that are dealing with the associated trauma related to that, so post-traumatic stress disorder, but our rehab services, our trauma surgeons, our ER doctors, they see everybody. So it's huge, and it causes for many people lifelong trauma. I think often we focus on the deaths, and I think the deaths are obviously hugely important, but then we have lots of people that are surviving that have associated trauma they live with, and then we have all of those that are impacted around them. And I think that's really, really important. I have people constantly asking me, why are rates of anxiety and depression going up so much for young people? Why did they double during the pandemic? And I think it's hard to measure all of the distress that's related to this for kids, but it's really big, and we can't meet the needs of the community, frankly. It's hard to, because there's such a huge need.
The second question is, how do you see the impacts of root causes in your practice?
Active root causes. That's a hard question. I think that there's so many different aspects that are multifactorial to the outcomes that my patients experience. When we look at the disparities among the people in our community, when we look at poverty, when we look at structural racism, when we look at lack of appropriate education or access to resources, there are so many different causes that contribute to the barriers that a lot of people face and a lot of my patients face. And so I see some people that have a lot more access and advantage and others that frankly don't. So I think one of the reasons why it's so important that we have such an interdisciplinary group here is that there is no simple answer to this problem. There is not one quick fix, which is obvious, I think, to everyone here, but we really have to listen to each other and learn from each other to come together on what are the many different ways to address it. So I think about motor vehicle accidents and deaths there, and the big decrease we've seen in deaths from motor vehicle associated accidents or crashes, and it's related to lots of different changes that came together in public health, not just one simple change.
Thank you for that. Mary, we have 2 more questions from the audience. We're going to let these students from Belton handle that. Please step forward.
I have 2 questions for the entire panel. One is, have we been having the wrong conversations, arguing too much about the Second Amendment or gun law in general? And then the second one is, are we too polarized?
Yes and yes.
Yes to that second one, yeah.
Yeah, definitely polarized and absolutely are having the wrong conversations about the wrong thing. When it comes to the Second Amendment, we'll just be honest, we can't take all the guns. We can't, it's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. There's no other way to put it. But we focus so much on the tool that is being used rather than all of the other pieces, like you just said, that go along with why someone chooses violence, not just gun violence, but violence, period. Why is it happening so much in our communities and in our neighborhoods? And again, that disinvestment, the system was built to keep us where we are right now. So we want to talk about this one piece, but it's multifaceted. There's so much more to it. But again, that conversation just keeps going to the Second Amendment, going to your gun rights, there's no way you can do it. We live in the United States of America, that's just where we are. But what we can do is adjust other systems to where people will use firearms to go hunting or to go to the, stress reliever or whatever the case and not need it because of survival. The same reason that officers feel the way they feel and they react the way they act within certain demographics, certain neighborhoods, and certain things, we feel the same way. We are trying to make it home. And and the trauma that goes along with that, and that is the tool that I'm using. So we focus so much on the tool, but not the other pieces that go into violence in general.
I would like to weigh in on that. You go ahead first.
You first. Okay, I'll go. Okay, I'll go first. I would just say, I agree with that. But I'm conflicted on this because I cover this every day in and out. The politics of it, the actually talking to the people that are doing the work on the ground. It's hard because, yes, I think the legislative conversation kind of distracts from a lot of things that we could be doing, right? There are a lot of good solutions that are happening, like the ones that Kyle is doing here in KC. There's great things happening in Buffalo, a bunch of cities that are like known as cities that have like a lot of violence, but in Buffalo last year they had a 40% decrease in gun violence. So there's like a lot of programs like that we could be talking about, but on the flip side of that, like the legislation and stuff does matter too. There is a lot of research out there that access, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this and the fact checkers can get me too, but the truth of the matter is if there are more guns in a place, the gun death rate goes up.
Absolutely. Agreed.
I do agree. I agree that we're not going to get rid of the guns. I don't think that is something that we should spend time even really talking about because it is so ingrained in our culture. I'm from Alabama. I grew up around guns. It's so ingrained in our culture that guns are going to be there, and I don't know that it's really productive to think about getting rid of all of the guns. But there are also laws that are still kind of polarizing sometimes that are effective, like extreme risk protection order laws that allow people to file a petition to take away someone's gun with a judge, with a court's decision, with their input, with due process, to take away somebody's gun if they're posing a threat to themselves or others. There are other things like safe storage laws that could require people to store their guns safely. So I'm conflicted because I think a lot of the times those legislative conversations do kind of go into the gutter and they devolve into really bad, unproductive conversations, but it's also important to talk about those things because the research is pretty strong that those types of laws help.
And even under a conservative read, which our country does a extremely, I would also add ridiculous read of the Second Amendment, it's still within a conservative read of the Second Amendment, you can still regulate guns. We can still have safe storage. That does not violate the Second Amendment. We could even ban certain types of weapons. Whew, I know that makes, wow, we're talking about banning guns, but we've done it here in the United States of America under that Second Amendment, and it was a constitutional law. So we've made this hard. The polarization of America has made this harder, but it puts, I think, bluntly, I feel like people like me get put in a category of, a crazy radical that wants to take everybody's guns away from them. And some of y'all would like to take your guns away from you. Like, bluntly, I would. But there's a lot of other answers in there that's short of that does not violate the Second Amendment. And part of it is because we've been fed narratives that are completely false regarding the Second Amendment. We've been fed narratives about what it actually means, how it reads, and what it must say. And I think there's a whole lot more space and room within the Second Amendment than the polarization perhaps would allow the discussion to be had.
And look, crime is a product of opportunity. So we need to reduce the opportunity. And across the United States,
way, what Kyle's doing is the hardest way. The easiest way would be to reduce the number of firearms that are within our community that are in an unsafe way. Sorry,
I think you can separate the tool from the action until you see a 14-year-old kid walk in the corner store with an AK-47 strapped over his arm. right here in this city.
Yeah.
Now you walk in that store to get you some Doritos or some hot chips, and you see a 14, 15-year-old boy with an AK on his arm. And you tell me if you want to separate the tool from the action. I don't want to be anywhere near a puberty boy with an AK-47. I don't want to be, you know what I'm saying? Hey, so I don't want to be in that environment.
What you don't want to be around doesn't determine propensity, though, right?
What I'm saying is it's a part of the environment. And once you see that that's part of your environment, I don't think you can say it's okay to have AK-47s in the environment because of the Second Amendment. Once you see a 15-year-old with it, which I've seen in my life, in my own human time on this earth, I've seen it. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to be in an environment where that's a possibility. Now, I don't want to take away you and your gun range situation. I would like to do that too and learn. But I also don't want to be in the corner store on 35th and Prospect and have some kid have an AK. And I doubt anybody in here
I got a kid in my
will.
class that brings a backpack. So the kids I was telling you about, they bring back guns that fit in their backpack.
Yeah.
That's what they bring to the classroom, right? And I'm not going to take their guns from them. So, because what I know is they got to come here and they got to leave, right? So they have to navigate the hood to get to me, and they got to navigate the hood to get back home. So that's one thing that I do know. Not one of those kids has ever, in no shape or form, up their gun, pulled their gun out, acted as if they were going to do anything with those guns. And these are active shooters, right? So what I know about the demographic that I serve is poverty, criminality, and violence. Poverty will imitate criminality and violence and doesn't even have the propensity to actually shoot the gun at all. Young adults are carrying guns like we used to wear chains back in the day. It's a fashion statement to carry a gun. Not everybody has the ability to shoot. So when we look at the history of the kids that up that gun, or the family, or the people that up that gun at the parade, right? They're connected to a family that actually comes from that, though. You see what I'm saying? It's not as cut and dry. And I understand it's scary. I'm not taking away from that. I think it's terrifying when you don't understand the culture. And I'm not saying you don't fully understand. I'm not coming for that.
I'm going to push back too, though. It's not about, Kyle, understanding the culture. I mean, there's one thing to understand the culture, and there's one thing to respect it, and there's one thing to say that this should not be tolerated in the culture. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, I'm still black. I still went to Southwest. I'm still me. I still have street smarts, book smarts. And I can also say, this is not appropriate in the culture. Like, somebody has to say, this is not okay. This is not right. You should not be carrying guns like you wearing chains. And somebody needs to be able to say that and not have a black card taken away. Not that you're trying to do that, but I'm making a point of...
It's hard to do that when somebody could drive down the street with a shotgun in their window, and it's okay in this demographic, but it's not okay in this demographic. I've seen somebody come into a whole church with a whole FN with a 30 clip on a white man and sit in the front row of that church, and nobody says okay. But this is where I'm going is nobody... It's based on your cultural preference. And I'm not saying culture as far as being black, because that's sometimes what we say. I'm saying culture is in gun culture. That's a culture in itself. Not having guns is a culture in itself, right? So every culture has the premise of what they believe is true or false. Where I'm trying to go with is, I lived in a place for 6.5 years where there were no guns, right? And I've seen more people die in my face with their hands than with guns. That's cold fact, right? So I'm not going to say it's not only, because having more guns in the area where people are going through struggles and stuff like that, if you influx a lot of guns in that area, it will spread. I'm not saying that.
I think that's part of the polarization, because
excuse me, guys, hate to interject here, because this is a great segment. Just hate to interrupt you guys. This is a great segment.
That's because I carried an AK. You know what I'm saying, to survive. So maybe forgive me.
We have one more question we need to get from the audience. Just one more. How many of you guys out here are parents, have children? All right. How many of you guys up here have children? This question is for you, and I can answer this question before it even gets asked. Go ahead.
Okay. So how many parents honestly know what is going on, what their kids are doing once they get to school and they're away from them?
I feel
confident in my relationship with my daughters. But my daughters and I have a very, very unique relationship and how it is kind of cultivated and how we've created it, how I've created that safe space. I feel very confident. And a lot of that comes from me understanding them at their level and not just, how do I say this, not just parenting. We say so much that we don't want to be our children's friend, which is true. My children know I'm their parent first, but I'm also their friend. They trust me. They can come I've been in conversations with my daughter where they will come home. I don't even have to say, how was your day? They'll tell me about who was kissing who got an F on their grade card, and who had a gun in their backpack. And then I'll ask them, what did you do? How did you bring that to somebody's attention? So I do believe that we can have very close relationships with our children, but it's in how we present that relationship.
I think all of my kids have lied to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've been lied to.
I lied to my parents, and I know my brother did.
I've definitely been lied to.
Yeah, no, I think I agree that we try our best. I have to tell you, I work with some of the best parents on earth, and I have seen them repeatedly in tears in my office when they find out something that they didn't know was going on with their kid. It is really, really hard at times for kids to talk to their parents about things. So while I hope that my 15-year-old is coming and telling me all the things, my bigger goal is to try to make sure that she is connected with other trusted adults, that I respect their opinions and their judgments, because like my mom is someone who she'll go talk to at times when maybe she won't talk to me. And I think that's really, really important because like even when you look at like suicide, half of kids who say they've been suicidal have parents who don't know that fact, at least in one big study. And that's pretty important. And I think that speaks to the fact that we do our best, we want to know, but it's hard to be everything.
Well, and that's, I mean, honestly, as we're trying to, start to wrap up here, that's part of this conversation. That's why, the young people chose this wide breadth of a panel, because it does kind of take everyone. And again, that sounds simplistic, but we know that is what works. I mean, within Latino culture, partly the reason why you have big, broad systems of people that I call cousin and they call me cousin, prima, but I'm kind of technically blood not, is because it's a large system, and if your mom is disconnected for some reason, something happening, well, there's an aunt or an uncle or, a cousin by name. I mean, that's part of all of this, and I would say all of you who came as well. How we manage things within American Public Square is that we like to allow every participant on the panel to answer it's a phrase almost, but and they knew this ahead of time, so they've had time to think through this. That really pushed the pressure, doesn't it? So what, now what? Kind of like as a concluding, so what, now what? And kind of it's meant to be as a marching orders, something to conclude. However you want to take this, down the line or haphazardly, whoever's ready.
Okay. Yes, and you did give me that assignment ahead of time, and I
failed.
I realized something else. But here's my so what, now what? Guns are a factor. They are a factor. When I told you that we're in a great gun experiment, pre the gun experiment, violence numbers were considerably lower than they are today. And that's in a pretty short period of time. When we know some basic facts, we should be able to do something with basic facts. And I would just ask you to stick with me, those of you who have an agreement on unfettered access to firearms is not necessarily a good thing. If you believe that's not keeping us safer, if it's not keeping kids safer, then stick with me in demanding change from the state apparatus that gives us our laws on this issue. It is hard, but it is not impossible. It's not impossible. Someday, I absolutely believe someday those laws will change again within this great state of Missouri, because they don't work for us. They don't work for us. They might work for someone that lives in a small farming community, but they don't work for us here in the urban core.
I'll go next. I would say don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I was thinking about earlier today, so the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was the first gun reform legislation that has passed in like 3 decades, despite all of the, in Washington, despite all of the things that we've talked about here tonight. And it got a lot of praise because it was the first one in 30 years, but to be honest, it was like very, very modest. It included like some small things for background checks, funding for red flag laws, stuff like that. But it also included $250 million over 5 years for programs, community violence intervention programs, similar to like what Kyle does. And that was a big step, but also think about the fact that that's $250 million over 5 years. I don't know if anybody off the top of their head knows what the budget of the Kansas City Police Department is for 1 year.
I bet Melissa does.
I think it's like $280 million a year.
I think it's a little more than 280 million now.
It went up, unfortunately.
So $250 million for the whole country for 5 years for programs that we know work. And we're learning more and more every day that they work. And that, I'm not discounting that. I think that is an important step, but we also need to think about what do we do after that? We have to step past and, talk about how we go forward from that. The $250 million is good, but that's like less than what one city spends on police in 1 year. So I like to think about how we can try to do more.
Thank you.
I would just like to end just kind of more of a reality check that I know that what we're talking about really is kind of a niche group of people. The vast majority of young people in Kansas City are not getting in trouble. They're not carrying guns. Right. Vast majority of them are going to school. Vast majority of them, their parents do know where they are. So we're talking about a subset of kids that obviously need all hands on deck and they need our attention. But I don't want any of you that are not from some of these communities to leave here thinking that that's the complete story, because it's genuinely not. Some of the things that's happening at City Council, we have revamped our Youth and Young Adult Commission. We'll be seating those young people, 23 people, here in the next month or so. That's really going to be the public-facing advocacy for young people in Kansas City. We imagine some of those kids will be just as involved. We imagine a lot of them won't. We're looking at, DJ and I have done lots of interviews of these young people, and it just really gets me optimistic and puts things in perspective, because I'm not looking at the news, I'm not looking at some flash in time, but I'm really seeing what our young people are capable of and what they're interested in across the city. And so young people in Kansas City have a bright future, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to be paying attention to the kids that absolutely need us to wrap our arms around them. So I just want to thank you for being here and being a part of that conversation.
So violence is the voice of the unrest. I think what Hazley pointed to was it being a small demographic. I think you're absolutely correct. I don't think there's enough hyper focus on that demographic. So what Lyrik is doing right now is we have our premier program. We have 7 programs that we do, but our cultural intervention, which our I Build program, does the wraparound support. So we do the cognitive behavior modification. We also do, we put out fires, things that are really going on in their lives. We've been doing like housing assistance, we've been paying rent. We find partners that are paying people's light bills so they can get into housing. You gotta put out a fire so they can start listening to the opportunities that exist. We're stipending young adults to actually come into the program, because you can't change their minds without changing their pockets. You can't serve poverty with poverty. So doing these wraparound supports, supporting not only the young adult that is in the program, but also the family member by doing some of this other stuff, helps silence some of the demons, some of the trauma that goes on in their lives to be able to hear. This process is not new. On does a variation in this process. Aim for Peace is revving up to get into this, more deeper into that process. They've been doing this for a very long time. But one thing that I loved about the Calcasieu Parish, where I went for in Louisiana, was he said the place, the real work isn't a place, it's a system, right? It's creating a system that can move and function fluidly in anywhere that you put it. But then I also want to pin down what also Ms. Hazley was saying is, after you create the system, you need to really put the system into a place, right? Right, into a physical place, right? And then release all the barriers like transportation and paperwork going from one organization to the next organization, right? So what our 2-year goal is, we plan on partnering with a lot of community partners to build a center that is directly geared towards these young adults, their entertainment, their internships, getting opportunities for like birth certificates and things like that, just a hub for everything that youth want to do. That is one of our, that is Lyrik, that is one of my champion projects that I've been working on for the last 2 years.
Right, yeah.
But I think that's
Thank you.
A key piece.
So what now, what next?
So what now, what? Widen the lens. Don't just keep looking at the tool. I understand that it is the middle ground, but that person had some type of trauma. That person had some type of opportunity. That person had something trigger. Look at the widen the lens. Look at the bigger picture. Have the right people at the table. Bring the ones who are boots on the ground, the ones who have been through the trauma, who have had that lived experience. Bring those to the table, those individuals to the table to have the conversations, to ensure that what's on white and black is actually reaching, that gray is actually reaching that community. So widen the lens, look at more than just the firearm, just the tool, include education. Most young Black individuals come into firearms initially either through experiencing some type of trauma and or video games. Most white households come into firearms because they were, introduced by a family member for recreational purposes. Let's be more inclusive when it comes to these things. I know years ago, I don't know how many years ago, I'm not from Kansas City, Missouri particularly, but firearm classes were taught in the high schools here in Kansas City. And gun violence was a lot lower then because they were introduced in a way that they didn't need to use it to protect themselves. It was used on an educational level. So widen the lens, look at more than just the tool, and we need to educate our youth.
There's a lot of wonderful things going on in Kansas City right now. And one of the reasons that I love working with Kyle is because it's true. We need to be able to look at the numbers, but we have to look at the stories because the stories are really, really important. And so but we also now in Kansas City don't have enough funding for CBI, and a lot of organizations are competing against each other for that funding, and that's problematic because to reduce crime, we have to collaborate, and we have to collaborate effectively. So that's kind of my big takeaway.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we need money. With the Dickey Amendment, there was a lot of limitation on research, and that's changing now, and there is more allocation of money, but we need a whole lot more. Why have we gotten so far with pediatric cancer survivor rates? It's because of investment, right? We have to invest ourselves in this multifaceted problem if we want to fix it. And I am so excited about the students working on this because that makes me feel really, really hopeful. I think there are people in this room that are going to really be part of all the answers we need to address this problem.
Thank you. Student ambassadors, I think you're going to close us out.
Good evening. We are student ambassadors from last year's cohort, 2022-2023, from Belton High School, and this year we worked with APS as program alum. We would like to thank our moderator, Mary Sanchez, and our esteemed panelists. Special thanks also to Toriano Porter, our roving reporter, and our fact checker, Cami Coons, our production crew from Lively, and our amazing teachers and student ambassadors. Thank you as well to each of you for attending.
Special thanks to APS founder and chairman of the board, Ambassador Alan Katz. Please stand. In American Public Square's 10th year, we want to extend our gratitude for your vision and persistence in creating a more civil society. Thank you, Ambassador Katz. Tomorrow, you will receive an email with a link to a short post-event survey. Please spend just a few moments to complete this survey. APS values your feedback, and they rely on it to plan programs and events that we will show up for. Please check out the APS website and consider joining us for upcoming events. And now I will turn it over to student ambassadors Emily and Keneen.
On behalf of American Public Square, we would like to present our moderator and each of our panelists with an engraved civility bell. We hope these come in handy as you seek to engage in civil, fact-based conversations at home and at work in your community.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's not the buzzer, but it's the bell. It's so sweet.
We would like to leave everyone with this final thought. The following is a quote from the book, The Big Sort, by Bill Bishop and Robert Cushing. In a country that is divided by economic prospects, by years of education, by the look and feel of what constitutes a family, and by political persuasion, we continue to believe that there might be a more important message we all need to hear.
The message people living in a democracy must understand, more than any other message, is that there are Americans who aren't just like you. They don't live like you. They don't have family like yours. And they don't think like you. They may not live in your neighborhood, but this is their country too.
Thank you all for coming, and good night.